Hey, what's up everyone? My name is Jakejames Lugo and welcome to the channel. So this review comes courtesy of AnnaRainJF, who sent me this game for a birthday gift for my birthday recently. So big thanks and big shout outs to him, and thank you so much to everybody else out there who showed me the birthday love. It really made me feel all special inside. But considering all the Devil May Cry videos I've been doing on this channel as of late, it was eventually going to happen that we had to talk about this game. Specifically, like you read with the title, we're going to discuss the Ninja Theory reboot to the Devil May Cry series, simply titled DmC Devil May Cry. I'm not even going to do the special intro like I normally do with all the videos I've done for this series. Let's just dive into this, and you'll know exactly why in just a bit. DmC Devil May Cry was developed by Ninja Theory and published by Capcom for multiple consoles. Originally, the game was released on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, but eventually got a definitive edition for PS4 and Xbox One that included downloadable content, rebalanced gameplay, and other goodies. DmC is a complete reimagining of the Devil May Cry series, despite some elements being pulled directly from other DmC games. Specifically, I would say that it borrows greatly from Devil May Cry 3 and Devil May Cry 1. The story of DmC takes place in an alternate reality, where Limbo City is secretly controlled by an army of demons under the rule of Mundus. Yeah, that same Mundus from the original Devil May Cry. Only here, the demon deity rules everything and enslaves humanity through the use of debt. In the midst of all this, a young man named Dante lives on the fringes of society aimlessly, with no recollection of his childhood or who he really is. Eventually, Dante crosses paths with a young girl named Kat, and his mundane life is turned upside down, bringing him face to face with his twin brother Virgil, the demon underworld, and the mysteries of his forgotten past. A lot of people would say that this is an edgy and gritty reboot of Capcom's action series, and they'd be pretty much right. Instead of the wisecracking Dante that we all love, this new Dante is rude, profane, and a gritty jerk that will rub everybody the wrong way. Some people even call this the emo Dante, because of his punk-style haircut, Union Jack branded jacket, and the terrible brooding face. He just comes off as super unlikable in almost every way. Hardcore Devil May Cry fans were definitely not happy with this new take. But first impressions aside, does DmC Devil May Cry still manage to be a fun and interesting game that takes the series in a whole new direction?
You make quite the team. I'm stronger. I'm smarter. I'm better looking. And I got a bigger dick.
Now, if I'm being totally honest, I really don't like the new redesign for Dante. Not so much for his look. I understand that you gotta kind of change things up and like really mix things up for a reboot. I just don't like his attitude. His personality is just not something that I really gravitate towards or really relate with or really like whatsoever compared to the original Dante. And I feel like a lot of fans felt very similar, not just because of nostalgia reasons. This new Dante is just a jerk. He's just like so unlikable. He's not funny. He's not interesting. Like everything about his backstory, even though it's very similar to the original Dante in some ways here and there, it's just not something where it's like, okay, there's like an excuse for him being a jerk to everybody all the time. It just felt like Ninja Theory was trying to take the idea of realness or realism and kind of substitute it with provocativeness. Like they kind of got the two mixed up somewhere. I could also say the same thing about all the other characters in the game, including Virgil, including Mundus, and Kat I feel like is supposed to be a replacement for Trish from the original Devil May Cry, but Kat also doesn't really seem like there's nothing there for her. Like I understand she's like some sort of witch, she's into like, you know, the black arts and witchcraft and stuff, which she learned from Virgil, but I was still hoping to see like, okay, what's the interpretation of Trish in this version of the Devil May Cry universe? Because she was such a big part of the actual original game, or even Lady from Devil May Cry 3, which is supposed to be the first game in the timeline. We don't get anything of that. We don't get anything remotely similar to that. We just kind of got Kat and she's just there. But enough about this idea of the game being a reboot, because I know some people really don't like this game because of that alone. What about the gameplay itself, which I've heard people talk about here and there, but is it actually good? Is it the one shining aspect of DmC Devil May Cry? Yes and no, but yeah, kinda. DmC follows the same blueprint as previous Devil May Cry games, but this reboot also tries to mix things up with a few changes. You control Dante and fight hordes of demons like before, mixing things up and trying to take them out in a stylish fashion, using all sorts of weapons and abilities. But instead of using orbs to purchase new abilities and items, Dante gains skill points for slaying demons, which can be used to unlock new abilities. The moves in DmC are pretty much standard fare for the series, but I don't find them to be as flashy as some of the previous games. One thing that's different about the combat, however, is how easy it is to transition between attacks and utilize your entire arsenal. You have all of your weapons available at any time, and you can freely switch between them on the fly, even during mid-combo. This can lead to some pretty cool combos at your disposal. Your melee weapons are mapped to the triggers on the controller, allowing you to switch between different weapons pretty fast. I actually like this a lot and find it super helpful when I want to try new things out with different strings of attacks. I could just hold a trigger down for one weapon and then switch to another weapon seamlessly, making my attacks look super fancy and deadly at the same time. You gain more weapons later in the game, which can be equipped using the D-pad to switch between them for the shoulder buttons. This arguably makes the combat of DmC the most fluid in the entire series. I'm really not kidding. Look how easy it is to do some of these crazy attack strings. Now, unfortunately, not everything is great about the gameplay in DmC. The camera, while better than most, can still run into a few issues during combat, especially in small and narrow areas. I've had a few times where things got in the way of my view and made fighting large groups of enemies a bit more difficult. I got around this by fiddling around with the camera's position, but it was still annoying. There's also the platforming and random puzzle stuff that you run into later in the game. Dashing across the air to get over large gaps looks very cool in some missions, but there are times when you'll miss a jump from not being able to pinpoint your landing or grab onto a ledge. It doesn't happen frequently, but when it does, it can make some missions take a little bit more time to complete. I should also mention that DmC is overall a very linear game. There's hardly any exploration or puzzles in it, except on one mission near the very end. You need to activate a machine using 4 generators you could turn on in any order. It's one of those silly puzzles that you see in some of the older DmC games that doesn't really need to be there, and it's only really meant to stretch out time. The game would honestly be better off without it. So besides this, DmC isn't all that bad in the gameplay department. If you're looking for a straightforward action game, DmC is actually pretty decent.
Hey, Bob. Put a spin on this.
My personal view on the terrorists is that they are disgusting, degrading, ghastly, sleazy, purient, and generally nauseating. The worst of them?
Now I have to be honest, I feel like DmC is probably on the easier side of things for the Devil May Cry series. I never really felt like any sort of like groups of enemies or certain situations I ran into were really overwhelming or overly difficult or completely unbalanced or unfair. I always had some sort of option or tool or all my different like weapons and abilities at my disposal, which were my answer to every single thing I ran into. This also transfers over to some of the boss fights as well. There's not a lot of them in DmC Devil May Cry compared to some of the other games, but at least the ones that you do have, including the fights with Mundus, including the fights with Virgil, and a couple other demons you run into, they're kind of easy as well. They're not that bad. You just gotta go to like specific spots and maybe hit them a certain couple like times and then just completely demolish them in like scripted events right afterwards. They're easier to deal with. They're still kind of exciting. They still look kind of cool, but maybe not on the challenging side of things compared to the older games. And there's really not much else I could say about the gameplay of DmC Devil May Cry. I feel like it's actually pretty decent, and a lot of people don't really give the gameplay and the combat of this game enough credit. They're so caught up on like the reboot like version or just a different interpretation of Dante and all these other characters, which I get. But if we're just looking at gameplay and really judging the game on its gameplay, I feel like you get some good stuff in here, and I would love to see some of these things in DmC implemented into future Devil May Cry games. I feel like Capcom could really pull some good elements from here and put into some future releases. Now with that out of the way, let's dive into some of the bonus content of DmC Devil May Cry, because there is some stuff here, but is it any good? Maybe not, maybe yes, kinda, maybe? Now, DmC Devil May Cry does have some bonus content you could access after completing the game at least one time. Luckily for me, the Definitive Edition has some goodies available right at the start. There's extra costumes for Dante, including the Devil May Cry 3 and Devil May Cry 1 versions of Dante, but you also have alternate versions of the reboot Dante as well. There's also a Bloody Palace mode, which is a little bit different than before, but in all honesty, I don't think I like it as much as the other games. In Bloody Palace, you fight waves of enemies in ascending levels, but you're also on a time limit. Each stage that you complete increases your time, but you'll get a game over if the timer reaches 0 or if you're defeated. Pretty basic. However, my one biggest disappointment in all of DmC Devil May Cry has to be the Virgil's Downfall DLC. Because man, you want to talk about a complete nosedive in quality? This DLC is not only short, lasting about 2 hours, but it's also completely pointless. There's no reason for it to exist. The story follows Virgil after the events of the main game and has a sequel bait ending for a game that sadly won't ever be made. Virgil amasses an army of demons in Limbo after fully embracing his own demonic power, teasing his return to face Dante later on, but it's doubtful we'll ever get to see that. I should also say that the cutscenes in this DLC use an animation style that is super random and really clashes with the in-game cutscenes from the main game. It's all very jarring and doesn't look as good as it probably should. I'll admit, we do get a little backstory on Virgil's childhood with Dante, but nothing really significant to change what's already shown in the main game. There's also this thing with Virgil facing a hollowed version of Dante and an evil version of himself, but it's really stupid and comes kind of out of nowhere. Now, Virgil himself isn't all that great to play with compared to Dante. He uses the Yamato Blade and has his own special attacks using an Angel and Devil mode, but they're significantly worse than what you got with Dante. By the time I was done with this DLC, I was both confused and really unsatisfied with all of the bonus content in this game. As much as I really wanted to like it, I really couldn't, which is a real shame.
She gave it to him. Remember? He was always her favorite. You know that. The way she admired his impulsiveness, how he followed his heart. You should find her. Show her what you've done. Finish what you've started.
Now, I should mention there is some concept art and promo renders here and there that you can unlock from doing different actions throughout the game, including using certain attacks, defeating a certain amount of enemies, completing the game on certain difficulty levels. All that is fine and dandy, but I don't find them to be as interesting or as rewarding compared to what we got in Devil May Cry 3. In that game, we got so much stuff, including videos, including like promo material, like concept art, and all these other like crazy things, stuff that I felt like was really cool. But what we got in DMC doesn't really hold up to the same level. Like I mentioned before, I'm just super disappointed with the DLC, Virgil's Downfall. I felt like it could have been longer, it could have gone into some other stuff, maybe hyped up a much more bigger battle against Dante playing as Virgil, or even if they really wanted to do something interesting, give us the game from Virgil's perspective. Give us like alternate missions, a series of events, some other enemies that might be exclusive to him compared to what we got with Dante. As we got right now in Virgil's Downfall, I get it's supposed to be like an epilogue to the game, it just really isn't all that great. So after everything that I've said, can I recommend that you guys check out DmC Devil May Cry? As much as I like some of the gameplay elements in this game, the story stuff and some of the extra content isn't really all that great. I feel like there's a lot more negatives than positives, even for the most hardcore of Devil May Cry fans. The new Dante really isn't all that likable, some of the other characters just aren't as good as their previous iterations, and while the gameplay is cool, I love being able to switch between the weapons so easily, everything else about this world and about this version of the DMC universe is just off-putting, and I'm kind of glad that we're really not going to get another game in this series. And I say this series specifically just referring to this reboot, because I don't really consider this part of the mainline Devil May Cry games. Even Capcom themselves have kind of like pushed this to the side, almost in the same way as Devil May Cry 2, and for that it might actually be for the better.
I don't know who I am anymore.
I know exactly who you are. You are Dante. Nothing more and nothing less.
Anyway, people, those are my overall thoughts about DMC Devil May Cry. At this point, I'm kind of like an expert on the entire Devil May Cry franchise because I've done videos and stuff on all the different games, even this one that people really hate. Do I think it's as bad as Devil May Cry 2? There's a hard argument there, but personally for me, I don't think so. I still think this is a better game than Devil May Cry 2. Again, totally my opinion, but I'm glad I at least got to review this game proper, kind of like what I did with some of the other games. And once again, I want to extend my thanks and my appreciation over to Anarain for giving me this game for my birthday. Thank you so much for that. It allowed this video to happen, and all the birthday love from you and everybody else was pretty darn cool. Thank you so much for that. But as always, like with every game that I talk about on this channel, that's just my opinion about it. Let me know what you guys think about DMC down below in the comment section. Tell me, are you a fan of DMC Devil May Cry? Do you think this game is actually good? Is it better than the mainline series? I don't think so. But talk to me about this stuff down below in the comment section. Thanks for watching this video, everyone. Go ahead and click the boxes on the side to see more videos and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Don't forget to go visit my Patreon page for exclusive gaming content that I know you'll really love. Hope you have a chill day. Peace out and stay epic, everybody.